Hi class, so our discussion for today is about forensic chemistry again. Okay, so for introduction, we have the crime scene wherein forensic science begins. There is where the recognition of physical evidence, proper preservation of physical evidence, collection, handling, packaging, labeling, and marking, transportation, and the chain of custody. This all happens in the crime scene. And during the collection, handling, packaging, labeling, transportation, and chain of custody, we have to always ensure the proper preservation of the physical evidence. We will know later what that is for. Okay, so forensic chemical evidence is vulnerable to contamination. That is why we have to observe the proper handling of physical evidence from the time of its recognition on the crime scene until the documentation, collection, packaging, and until the transport of the physical evidence to the proper appropriate laboratory for examination. So we always have to preserve the integrity and the evidentiary value of the forensic chemical evidence. So for definition of terms, we have forensic science, forensic chemistry, drugs, arson, explosive, poison, crime scene, physical evidence. We will define each of of those terms individually. So what is forensic science? This is an application of scientific principles to criminal and civil laws that are enforced by the police agencies in a criminal justice system. Next is forensic chemistry. This is an interdisciplinary field of chemistry tasked to solve cases that can only be explained or resolved by applying analytical method of investigation and instrumentation. So we have discussed on our previous meeting about the analytical methods of investigation used in forensic chemistry. If you can recall about the qualitative analysis and the quantitative analysis. Then we have drugs. What are drugs? These can be defined as a natural or synthetic substance that is used to produce physiological or psychological effects in humans or other high-order animals. So itong drugs na ibig sabihin, hindi agad-agad yan yung mga nahuhuli ng mga police during police operation. Yes, we can identify those as drugs, pero hindi lahat ng drugs ay illegal. Yung mga drugs na ginagamit natin for medication, for example, paracetamol, mga pain relievers, medications in the hospital, they are also considered drugs, pero hindi sila yung nire-regulate ng laws natin na pwedeng maka-affect sa physiological and psychological effect sa atin. So, lahat ng drugs pwedeng makagamot or makasama sa katawan ng tao. It depends only on the prescription, kapag sumunod tayo sa prescription or not. Just like an antibiotic, hindi tayo makaka-purchase ng antibiotic without a prescription. Because kapag hindi natin na-take ng tama yung antibiotics, magkakaroon ng antibiotic resistance yung mga katawan natin, which later on, the antibiotics will fail to fight the bacteria inside our body. So, dapat kapag magte-take in tayo ng antibiotics, susundin natin yung prescription ng mga doctors natin. Next is arson. What is arson? This is the crime of setting a fire. Okay. So, we have to highlight setting a fire with intent to cause damage or gain. Pwede rin gain yan. Kasi for example, merong isang property na gusto nilang naka-insured. So, para makuha nila yung insurance, minsan nagsiset sila ng fire. So, yun yung mga tinitingnan ng mga investigators ng insurance. Next is explosive. An explosive material, or what we call the explosive, is a substance that contains a great amount of stored energy that can produce an explosion. An explosion is a sudden explosion of the material after initiation, usually accompanied by the production of light, heat, sound, and pressure. Poison. This is a substance that when introduced into or absorbed by a living organism in sufficient amounts causes death or injury, chemically producing a morbid or noxious condition. So yan yung definition ng poison. Next is a crime scene. A crime scene is the place where the essential ingredients of a criminal act took place. Ano-ano ba yung mga ingredients na sinasabi dito? So, meron tayo dyan, pwedeng makita natin dyan yung victim. Pwede rin naman sometimes, in some cases, makikita rin dyan yung mga suspects or yung perpetrators na tinatawag. Meron din dyan yung mga possible evidence na pwedeng mag-link sa suspect, sa victim, dun sa crime scene na nangyari or sa crime. Okay? Next is physical evidence. Ano yung mga sinasabi natin physical evidence? This is composed of any or all objects that can establish that a crime has been committed or can provide a link between a crime and its victim or a crime and its perpetrator. The overview of forensic chemistry. So, forensic, as we have discussed previously, is from the Latin word forensis, which means forum, wherein a place where Romans conduct public discussions. This also refers to speaking the truth in public. Katulad ng na-mention ko before, kapag nagte-testify sa court, yung mga tinatawag natin expert witnesses, that is an example of speaking the truth in public doon sa court. Kasi di ba mag-swear tayo or mag-take tayo ng oath to tell the truth and nothing but the truth sa public. So, as we have discussed before, the fathers of forensic chemistry and toxicology, we have Dr. Edmund Lockhart. So, ang pinaka-famous na message ni Dr. Edmund Lockhart is that every contact leaves a trace. Ito yung parang basis natin sa pagko-collect natin ng evidence sa crime scene. At naghahanap din tayo ng trace evidence sa crime scene na pwedeng mag-link sa suspect or sa victim doon sa mismong crime because of this principle from Dr. Edmund Lockhart. Next, we have Professor Matthew Orfila about the poisoning of Charles Lafarge. That is why he's considered the father of modern forensic toxicology. So, the science of forensic chemistry. This involves the study of crime analysis, the causes of a natural death, which cannot be explained just by looking plainly at our victims, illegal drugs, chemical determination of the causes of fire. There. So, dito sa causes of unnatural death, pwede dyan yung analysis natin in poisoning. So, kukuha sa autopsy, during autopsy, kukuha yung medical legal officer ng stomach contents or anything, or any fluid na pwedeng mag-identify ng toxic substances inside the body of our victims. So, this includes research, practice, presentation. So, these processes include scientific and legal means. So, this is a worldwide accepted science that produces conclusive results that can withstand contention. So, we have conclusive results here. That is why usually sa mga drug examinations, yung testimony ng forensic chemist are already stipulated to expedite the court proceedings. Because the procedures conducted in forensic chemistry, especially in the examination of dangerous drugs, are considered scientific and legal and are worldwide accepted science so that they produce conclusive results. So, mas mabilis na yung processing or pag-process ng isang kaso dahil nag-stipulate na sila, hindi na kailangan mag-testify ng forensic chemist sa court of law unless may hinihingi sa kanya na dapat niyang i-explain. So, these are the cases involving... Okay, sorry for that, class. Sorry po. Okay, drugs. Tuloy na natin yung discussion. For drugs, this is a chemical substance that brings about physical, physiological, behavioral, and or psychological change in a person taking it. So, this is a substance other than food which is intended to affect the structure or function of the body of a man or animal. Abuse. Okay, here, this is the magic word for drugs, for our illegal drugs. Abuse usually refers to illegal drugs. There we have it, illegal drugs, but may also be applicable to drugs that are available legally, such as prescribed medications and certain over-the-counter medications. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina. So, hindi lahat ng drugs ay illegal. Yung iba ginagamit natin as pain meds, hospital medications. Pero merong mga drugs na napag-aralan na na-abuse, katulad ng mga narcotics, mga dangerous drugs, yung shabu, marijuana. Kaya sila ni-regulate. So, at saka pinagbawal dito sa Pilipinas. Pero, hindi lang naman illegal drugs yung na-abuse. Just like, yung mga sleeping pills, minsan kapag may sobrang stress or sobrang problema yung mga tao, na-abuse yun, nag-overdose sila. So, nagkakaroon din ng overdose sa sleeping pills. Minsan yun nga, hindi tama yung pagkainom nila ng gamot. Just like yung inexplain ko kanina sa antibiotics, hindi nila sinusunod yung prescription. So, nagkakaroon ng problem sa katawan nila. Nagkakaroon ng hindi magandang effect. Okay? Next is classification of drugs. We have stimulants. These drugs are used to increase the mental activity, relieve fatigue, and offset drowsiness. So, ibig sabihin ng stimulants, nag-stimulate siya ng functions ng ating central nervous system. So, kaya nagkakaroon tayo ng increased mental activity. Merong kahit hindi sila nakakaramdam ng antok, hindi nakakaramdam ng gutom. Kaya yung ibang gustong magpapayat, ang ginagamit nila na illegal drugs is yung mga stimulants para hindi sila makaramdam ng gutom, hindi sila kakain. So, they can cause mental retardation, especially to unborn babies. For example, may nag-take na pregnant mother, tapos hindi niya alam na, or pwede rin alam niya na buntis siya, pwede mag-cause ng mental retardation. Extended wakefulness, yun yung sinasabi ko sa inyo. Kaya sila usually, iba nagtitake. Minsan, mga doctors na kailangan na hindi sila matutulog sa shift. Merong mga nagtitake ng stimulants. Okay? Loss of memory. Irritability, anxiety, and fear. So, yan na yung mga causes ng, yung mga cause ng stimulants. Lacks of interest towards studies and work. Chronic snorers suffer from irritation of the nose to frequent nose bleeding. Kasi, yung iba, ini-intake nila yung stimulants by inhalation or sniffing. Kaya nagkakaroon sila ng frequent nose bleeding. Loss of appetite. Ito nga yung sinasabi ko. Kaya sila nagtitake para pumayat sila dahil hindi sila magugutom. Feeling nila. So, these are the examples of stimulants. We have yung very famous at usually yung dinadala for examination sa crime laboratory is methamphetamine hydrochloride or most commonly known as shabu. This one is cocaine and Bangkok pills. Yun yung examples. So, for methamphetamine hydrochloride, I will show you a presentation of a single person who have been arrested over the year maybe in the United States of America. And we have, there are pictures of her every time na na-arrest siya. So, let us see how methamphetamine hydrochloride addiction changed her physical appearance. Okay. So, there. So, yan. Kung makikita nyo kung gaano yung difference, gradually, nagkakaroon siya ng changes in her physical appearance, and then, hanggang sa tumatagal, hindi pa rin siya nag-change, naging addicted na talaga siya sa methamphetamine hydrochloride. Ito na yung nangyari sa kanya. So, pumayat siya ng sobra, at saka parang hindi na niya naaalagaan yung sarili niya. So, yan yung makikita natin na physical evidence na nagtitake siya na addicted siya sa methamphetamine hydrochloride. Another classification of drugs is the depressants. So, these are substances that depress, from the word itself, the function of the central nervous system of the body. Kung yung isa, yung stimulants, ay nag-stimulate siya ng functions ng brain natin, ito namang depressants, nagde-depress naman siya. So, they are opposite. They have opposite effects on the central nervous system. For example, are sedatives and hypnotics. So, next are narcotics. These are substances that are used to eliminate pain. Examples are opium, morphine, heroin. So, usually, ginagamit din to sa hospitals. Yung opium, morphine, and heroin para sa treatment ng patients with pain na nararamdaman. For example, after an operation, painful operation, magte-take sila ng pain medication. So, merong pwedeng morphine, usually ginagamit sa hospitals. So, the effects are slows down and in some cases stops breathing kapag ka nasobrahan, hindi tama yung pag-take. So, nausea and vomiting, constipation, and it lowers the testosterone levels. The use of needles for drug injection provides an entryway for many kinds of infection. Sometimes it can also affect the veins in our body and may also cause AIDS or HIV infection. Next are hallucinogens. These are drugs that can produce changes in mood and behavior and can produce delusions and hallucinations. Usually, yung sa mga party drugs, hallucinogens yung tinatawag doon na nagkakos ng hallucinations ng mga party goers. Minsan kasi inahalo pa nila sa alcohols, kaya nagkakaroon ng di magandang effect sa katawan nila. So, example is yung pinakasikat dito rin sa atin, aside from methamphetamine hydrochloride, is marijuana. Then we have others, the pencyclidine, lysergic acid, diethylamine, or LSD. So, another are inhalants. So, these include a wide range of drugs whose volatile vapors are taken in through the nose and trachea. They are taken through volatilization, and drugs which are inhaled after burning or heating are not included. Itong mga sinasabing drugs na inhaled after burning or heating, usually, di ba yung methamphetamine hydrochloride, yung cocaine, hinihit siya before tinitake. So, hindi siya kasali sa tinatawag natin na inhalants dahil hindi naman sila nagvo-volatilize. Ano-ano yung examples niyan? Ibig sabihin, pag nag-volatilize sila, very volatile yung substances na kapag binuksan mo, maamoy mo siya agad. Examples are this, amyl nitrate, vasodilator siya, toluene, which are considered inhalants. Pero, ito sabi ko nga, tobacco, marijuana, and crack are not. Kasi sila yung mga binaburn before sila inhale. Itong toluene, it is actually present in yung sinasabi natin na tinitake in ng mga rugby boys. Sa rugby, meron kasi siyang toluene. So, yun yung ini-inhale nila, yun yung volatile part ng portion ng rugby natin. That is why, nire-regulate na rin yung pagbebenta ng rugby sa mga supermarkets or other stores. So, these are the drugs of abuse in the Philippines. We have methamphetamine, marijuana, ecstasy. So, there are the pictures. Yung psychoactive component ng marijuana leaf, ang tawag doon ay tetrahydrocannabinol or THC. THC. Okay. Next is ecstasy. Or the chemical name for ecstasy is MDMA, methylene dioxymethylamphetamine. So, these are amphetamine type stimulants. If you will look closer, methylamphetamine, meron siya sa pangalan niya. So, coming from methamphetamine also. So, what are the cases that involves forensic chemistry? Explosives. Another case, we have discussed about drugs. Now, we are going to discuss about explosive. So, as defined earlier, this is the definition of an explosive. There. Pressure, wave, shock, heat, and light is present. We have low explosives, and this is an example of a low explosive. So, you will see how the propagation of explosion using low explosive. We have white smoke. So, there is the production of heat at high temperature. So, white smoke kapag low explosives ang gamit. So, ito yung difference ng low explosive sa high explosive. Yung low explosives, nagde-deflagrate siya, hindi siya nagde-detonate. So what is deflagration? It means to burn down, or is a technical term describing subsonic combustion that usually propagates through thermal conductivity. Hot burning material hits the next layer of cold material and ignites it. So nagkakaroon ng heating. The action of heating a substance until it burns away rapidly. So that is what happens after an explosion using a low explosive. So kung makikita nyo, medyo maliit lang siya, yung crater na tinatawag. Now, high explosives naman tayo. So we have the initial setup. Kung mapapansin nyo, yung smoke is black due to hydrocarbons. So we have tremendous heat. And there is a production of shock wave and shattering effect. So, kanina kapag low explosives yung gamit natin, ang sabi natin, deflagration of course and not detonation. What is the meaning of detonation? It involves a supersonic exothermic front accelerating through a medium that eventually drives a shock front propagating directly in front of it. So, meron tayong shock na ma-observe using high explosive and shattering effect. So, to detonate means to explode or cause to explode. So, meron tayong mga tinatawag na improvised explosive devices or usually yung mga na-observe sa mga explosion. This is an explosive device often used in unconventional warfare. It typically consists of an explosive charge, detonator, and an initiation system. So that is an example of a setup of an IED or improvised explosive device. So we have the following components. We have the power source, initiator, explosives, the switch. So ito yung mga components ng tinatawag natin na IED. So this is an example of an actual IED recovered in a crime scene. So a blasting cap is in a low order explosion. So that is an example also. Used by an Indon bomber. So there are 13 pipe bombs in the vest. So that is an example of a setup of an IED. Those are the pre-blast components. So there is the booster detonating cord containing PETN or pentaerythritol trinitrate. PETN is an explosive ingredient. This is a complete set of an IED using 100 grams of TNT or trinitrotoluene, that is an explosive. So, yung TNT is considered a high explosive. So, ito yung magiging crater niya kapag yung IED natin ginamit yung example of high explosive, which in this case is TNT. So, there is a crater or the seat of explosion. So we have, this is another IED using remote control device. So yun yung example. Full type IED. So this is what is formed using a high explosive in the IED. So that is the seat of explosion. So this photo is an example of a crime scene area. So the universal rule in the crime scene is to use gloves in collecting fragments. So yung mga SOCO personnel natin or the members of the SOCO team, ang golden rule sa kanila is before sila pumasok sa crime scene or mag-observe or kahit ano, kailangan nakasuot na sila ng gloves at saka ng mask. Bakit yun yung golden rule? Kasi, di ba sabi nga ni Dr. Edmund Locard that every contact leaves a trace. So, para maiwasan natin na maiwan pa yung trace ng mga SOCO team natin doon sa crime scene mismo, that is why gumagamit tayo ng gloves and mask. So, another case is arson. Okay. So, what are the inconveniences of an arson investigation? So, these are yung nagpapahirap sa investigation. So, pwedeng nakaalis na yung perpetrator long before any official investigation is started. Siyempre, wala naman na siya dun sa crime scene kapag nagkakaroon ng fire doon. So, the proof of commission is more difficult to obtain due to extensive destruction. So, pwedeng nasunog na yung proof of commission. So, what are the possible motives in arson? So, pwedeng vandalism, gusto lang makagawa ng damage, revenge, directed at a particular object or person to extract revenge, profit, usually to collect insurance or other profit. Yun yung sinasabi ko kanina. Bakit nagpupush ng arson yung ibang tao? Minsan din naman, it can also be because of an extremist action or it can be because of an act of terrorism. Or pwedeng meron silang grievance sa government or other institutions. Para, siguro yung iba kasi yun yung iniisip nila para makakos sila ng attention para mai-air nila yung grievances nila. So, pwede rin para makonceal yung isang crime scene. For example, may namatay na tao doon. So, at first, kapag nasunog na yung katawan, hindi na usually ma-identify or hindi na makikita na meron palang patay doon unless hindi totally nasunog yung katawan ng cadaver natin. Or pwede rin para masira yung mga pwedeng physical evidence na magamit against a perpetrator. Yung iba naman just because of thrill or excitement. Due to psychological reasons. Next is poisoning. So, many cases of criminal poisoning may go undetected as a result of the difficulties associated with detecting this type of crime. So, meron na minsan namamatay na akala natural death lang. Yun pala, unti-unti na before pa pinopoison yung victim na yun. So, hindi natin malalaman na poisoning pala yung kaso because akala natin ano lang siya, because of natural death lang. So, unless mag-conduct ng autopsy and then toxicology examination, doon lang natin malalaman just in case na poisoning pala yung reason or cause of death. So, what are the commonly used type of poison? We have arsenic, yung katulad ng ginamit ni Madame Lafarge doon sa asawa niyan si Charles. Arsenic and its compounds are used in the production of pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides. So, kaya masama sa katawan natin kapag naka-inhale tayo or naka-ingest tayo ng pesticides, herbicides, or insecticides dahil meron siyang component na poisonous, which is arsenic. So, dapat mag-iingat tayo palagi dyan. Gagamit ng gloves when handling this type of chemicals, and maghuhugas palagi ng kamay or avoid ingestion or inhalation of these types of insecticides. So, arsenic is also a common natural and anthropogenic contaminant in sediments, surface waters, and groundwaters. Arsenic poisoning from naturally occurring arsenic compounds in drinking water remains a problem in many parts of the world. So, hindi lahat ng tubig na nakikita natin ay potable or pwedeng inumin. Kasi merong iba na pwedeng nagko-contain ng poison. So, that is arsenic, the mineral native of arsenic. So, arsenic poisoning is a medical condition caused by increased levels of the element arsenic in the body. The symptoms include headache, confusion, convulsion, diarrhea, vomiting, and in severe cases, coma and death. So, yan yung example ng merong arsenic poisoning sa katawan niya. Nag-exhibit siya ng ganyan sa skin niya. Another one is cyanide. This occurs when a living organism is exposed to a compound that produces cyanide ions when dissolved in water. So, common poisonous cyanide compounds include hydrogen cyanide gas and crystalline solids, potassium cyanide, and sodium cyanide. So, these are poisonous compounds that are harmful in our body. The cyanide ion halts cellular respiration by inhibiting an enzyme in the mitochondria called cytochrome C oxidase. So, yan yung reaction na nangyayari sa katawan natin kapag nakapag-ingest ng cyanide. So, another case is gunshot residue. So, gunshot residue is increasingly used as forensic evidence in cases where guns have been used to commit a crime. This materializes whenever a firearm is discharged. When the trigger is pulled, fire is sent into the cartridge. The intense heat burns the gunpowder and converts it into gas. The process leaves behind residue. Ano ba yung mga residue na sinasabi natin? These contain unburned gunpowder particles, which are partially burned gunpowder on the carbonaceous soot from completely burned gunpowder. So, ito yung mga hindi na burn kapag nagkaroon ng firing yung isang firearm. Hindi naman lahat 100% nako-convert or nahi-heat up. So, yung mga natitira, yun yung mga tinatawag na natin na gunshot residue. So, residue most likely can be found on the hands, but also on the skin, clothing of a person who fired a gun and on the bullet holes of a victim. These particles scatter and deposits on those objects. So, residue most likely can be found on the hands. So, how is gunshot residue or gunpowder residue is detected in the Philippines? So, meron tayong sinasabi dito na firearm discharge can deposit residues to a person at close proximity. So, hindi ibig sabihin na kung sino lang yung nag-fire ng gun, siya lang yung pwedeng makahanapan ng gunpowder residue. So, interpretation as to who fired the weapon should be made with caution. That is why the examination or the result of an examination on gunpowder residue is not actually conclusive in court. So this is only corroborative evidence. Hands or body parts close to the firing weapon may have residue consistent with having fired the weapon. But if there is no presence of gunpowder residue, this will not conclusively mean that the person did not fire a weapon. So kapag walang or nag-negative siya sa gunpowder residue examination or paraffin test as we use in the Philippines, hindi ibig sabihin na kapag nag-negative siya sa paraffin test, hindi na siya nag-fire ng weapon. Bakit kaya? So, yung ginagamit natin na test is the paraffin test, designed to collect gunpowder residues and nitrates on the hands, particularly in the pores, resulting from firing a gun due to the manner in which the powder residue may have been blown out around the edge of the revolver cylinder through imperfect fitting parts of the gun. So, this is not specific, but it can be used as corroborative evidence to support the allegations of eyewitnesses or intended to support the testimony of eyewitnesses. There are instances that the person who fired a gun will give a negative result. Why is that? Bakit kaya sa tingin nyo pwedeng mag-negative yung result even though nagpaputok siya ng firearm talaga? So, this is your assignment. What are the So your assignment is to research on what are the factors affecting the paraffin examination. Ano-ano yung factors na nag-a-affect sa gunpowder residue examination or paraffin test. Okay? And you will submit it also today in using Google Documents. You have to turn it in. I will post it also on your classwork. Okay? And by 2 p.m., I will expect it na turn in yun na. Okay? Thank you. So, we will move on to the collection and preservation of evidence. So, this is an example of an illustration of a crime scene. So, as you can see, merong mga blood spatter or blood stains. Ito yung cadaver natin. Meron ditong mga handprints. What is this? Merong necklace. And then, merong shoe print sa crime scene na to. Okay, so how can we properly collect and preserve the physical evidence we can find in the crime scene? It's not only physical evidence that we find in the crime scene. There is another kind of evidence which we call the trace evidence. So we have to assess the crime scene to recognize the types of physical evidence that may be present. So for example, in a shooting incident, pwedeng makarecover tayo ng mga fired cartridges, pwedeng firearm. Kapag naman stabbing incident, pwedeng merong knife tayong ma-recover, mga DNA specimens also. So what is documentation of the crime scene? What does documentation of the crime scene mean? We have note-taking, the photographing or the videographing of the crime scene, and the sketch. And then we have the collection and preservation of evidence. So these are the possible evidence you can collect in the crime scene. We have the visible evidence or those evidence you can see in plain view. So unahin natin sa pag-recognize or pag-collect yung mga most fragile evidence or the biological evidence na pwedeng masira agad. Then we have the objects that need to be moved. Then we have the hidden evidence. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na trace evidence. Usually, they are found during the final crime scene search. So, these are the containers that we can use for packaging physical evidence. We have paper bags. These are for air-dried biological samples. For example, swabbing of blood stains or DNA specimens. We have to, before we package the biological evidences, yung mga blood, yung swabbing for DNA, we have to first air dry them before putting them in paper bags. They should be put in paper bags and not plastic bags kasi pwedeng magkaroon ng moisture kapag nilagay sila sa plastic bags. And yung moisture na yon, pwedeng masira yung biological samples natin. Next are air-dried plants. For example, may mga marijuana na found sa crime scene. I-air dry muna siya before ilalagay sa paper bags. Now, clear plastic bags can be used for drug specimens and other non-biological specimens as well. We have boxes which can be used for knives and other tools. The glass vials for liquid samples and metal cans for usually during arson investigation. And these packaging containers, kapag nilagay natin yung mga pieces of evidence natin, kailangan malabel natin siya ng mabuti, okay? And we have to seal this evidence using a tamper-proof evidence tape. Kung wala naman tayo nung provided na evidence tape na tamper-proof, we can always improvise to make a tamper-proof evidence tape. Hindi naman kailangan yung laging may evidence, ganun. So, pwede tayong mag-improvise, lalo na wala tayong budget. And then, we can use reinforced packaging tape or scotch tape or masking tape. Yun yung sinasabi ko na improvised tamper-proof evidence tape. Basta, be sure that is tamper-proof. So, we can also use heat sealing of the packaging. So, what is considered to be a sealed package? A sealed package whose contents cannot readily escape and the seal of the container has not been tampered with. So, hindi siya nag-undergo ng tampering. So, for labelings and markings, ito yung ilalagay natin sa labels and markings. So, the collecting person's initial, time and date of collection, complete description of the evidence, exact location where evidence were collected, investigating agency name and file number. So, sa tape natin or dun sa, for example, drug evidence, hindi naman lahat ito mailalagay dun sa plastic sachet natin na maliit lang. So, usually, ang makikita natin dyan is yung markings or initial ng collecting person. So, which is enough sa court para ma-identify ng collecting person na yun yung specimen na nakuha niya dun sa crime scene. Pero dapat meron pa ring mga note or descriptions kung saan magtutukoy ng time and date of collection, description, location, and yung unit nila. So, the characteristics of evidence, we have discussed last time, yung individual characteristics. Pwedeng makita yan sa mga evidence natin for fingerprints and DNA. Kasi hindi lahat ng tao pare-pareho ng fingerprint. Actually, it has been said that no two individual have the same sets of fingerprints or the ridges in our fingerprints are not the same. Even identical twins. Wherein DNA naman, pwedeng magkapareho yung DNA. So, pwedeng yung DNA pattern and sequencing ng isang tao ay the same doon sa family members niya. Pero, pwede ring mag-identify yan ng isang tao with an individual characteristic. So, yung class characteristics na tinatawag natin, example are fibers from a brand of clothing or the hair strands. So, ano yung more powerful na evidence? That is the evidence with individual characteristic. Kasi, mapipinpoint niya mismo kung sino yung individual na merong DNA nun or kung kaninong fingerprint yun mismo. Lalo na kung may database na tayo. Next is packaging of evidence. So we have to package one item of evidence per container to avoid contamination. So hindi natin pwedeng pagsama-samahin yung mga evidence natin sa isang container lang. We should not reuse container, and we should not mix different types of evidence to prevent contamination and para din ma-maintain natin yung evidentiary value ng mga evidence natin and their integrity. So, yung container, kapag i-mark natin, we have to always include the following. So, yan. So, yan yung i-include natin. Merong date, identifier, or the case. Pwedeng yun. Initials of the actual person who placed the item on the container. And this is usually done by the evidence technician or custodian, maybe assisting with the taking of measurements or etc. So, depende sa SOP ng office. So, the following types of evidence should be packaged as follows. So, for flammable liquids, this should be sealed in glass, in a sealed glass or plastic bottles or metal cans. So, kailangan kapag sa pag-transport natin, packaging, labeling, and markings, and collection of the evidence, kailangan pa rin natin mag-ingat. So, okay, for dry or powdered substances, they can be put in a Ziploc bags unless they contain moisture. So, yung moisture lagi natin iniiwasan yan kasi pwede itong makasira ng evidence natin. For damp or wet materials, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, there should be first air-dried and then before placing them in a paper bag or metal can. So, for chain of custody, which is very important for the evidentiary value of the specimen or our evidence, the evidence should be secured in a safe area. Usually, sa amin, sa crime lab, ang ginagamit namin is the evidence room, which is specifically designed to hold and preserve such evidence. The transport to the lab for specific examination, and all evidence handling must be documented so that your evidence will be admissible in court. As few people as possible should handle the evidence. Kung wala naman siyang kinalaman sa kaso at sa examination ng evidence, it is better na hindi na siya mag-handle ng evidence na yon para mas malesen natin yung length or yung chain of custody. Okay? So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. I will be expecting your classwork before our schedule ends at 2 p.m. today. Thank you, class. If ever you have any questions, just feel free to message me and I will try my best to explain to you the matters more clearly. Thank you.